Welcome to the Honourable and the Hack.
Hey everyone, this is the Honourable and the Hack. I think we're still Newfoundland and Labrador's newest podcast. Who knows how long that lasts? But so glad to have you with us. My name is Andrew Parsons, and as always, I am here with my co-host, co-founder, co-creator, the man as always, Mr. Alex Bill.
Hey, Andrew, good to be back as always. And yeah, I don't know how much longer we get to hold on to that title. Podcasts are popping up all the time. Not so many in Newfoundland, though. So, we're happy to be plugging that hole and getting the great response that we've been getting.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little while back about just, still starting off this, and it is still fairly new, but I feel like we're hopefully finding that groove. We're trying to get better all the time, and the feedback has been great. But the most important thing is that it's been enjoyable, and there is so much to talk about. I think what I'm really looking forward to is that as we move into 2026, whether it's the House of Commons coming back, the House of Assembly coming back, there's just a lot going on here in the province, in the country, let alone everything that's going on globally and what's going on an international basis. But we've got a lot to talk about right here, just in our in our own capital city.
Yeah. And for some of these podcasts, we will probably do a little bit of a topical discussion between you and I beforehand or set something up. But, city politics, like you mentioned, are interesting enough. And I think we've got a great guest today. So I'm looking forward to bringing her on.
Absolutely. And before we get to the introduction, just want to say, uh, I was really excited for today's podcast as we're getting ready to introduce this individual. So let's bring it on and let's introduce this guest.
Politics is often accused of being out of touch and young people falling out of touch with politics. Today's guest is somebody who puts that theory to the test. She's engaged like no other.
She made history in St. John's municipal politics and has already got some big files on her desk.
So today we're going to welcome to the program Kate Cadigan, the youngest elected councillor in St. John's history. All right. Well, without further ado, welcome to the program, Kate Cadigan.
Hello. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on, Councillor Cadigan. It's again, I don't think we've actually been in the same political circles, but I got to tell you, as someone that enjoys taking in politics, it was really fun watching your campaign. So, I guess we'll lead off with this. First time in municipal or in elected politics, elected to St. John's City Councillor as a councillor at large. How's it been?
It's been great. It's been a whirlwind of a year. It was about a year ago now that I kind of thought about it and decided I was going to put my name forward. And since then, it's been go, go, go. And of course, being elected back in October, it hasn't stopped. The fun is still going, and it's been great so far.
You talked about being a year ago about when you got started, and I thought that was a really interesting part of your campaign. Back in 2011, I was kind of very, very loosely affiliated with Dave Lane's campaign. And it was similar. It was an at-large campaign. And one of the big reasons, maybe the biggest reason for his success, and I see it mirrored in yours, is just getting started early. You see a lot of at-large candidates who don't have their signs up on day one, who are like musing about it just a few months in advance, or only starting to raise money months in advance. But it strikes me that what your campaign and Dave's campaign and Maggie's campaign, her first time around, Maggie Burton, had was the foresight to plan ahead and get started early. Was that your decision? Did you have people telling you, like, if you want to succeed, get started early? What was the process, and why were you able to kind of get it off the ground as early as you did?
Yeah, it was definitely a part of the plan, was to start early. I'm a planner naturally. So once I had decided that, this is what I'm going to do, I was like, okay, let's get to it. Let's start planning. I want to have everything in line. So really, when the real campaign period starts, we can hit the ground running. And you're right. You need time to plan, or else things kind of come up on you quickly that you don't realize. Like, you mentioned the signs, and we were out there day one putting up signs. I was out there with a hammer. Not very good at it, but I did it anyways. And I think it really helped, to be honest, especially as somebody going into the political world with a little bit less of a name, if you will. I don't have the same kind of network where I don't have the same professional experience. So having, that year to plan by myself, but also I was on the campaign trail for about 5 months publicly. So I had a lot of time to meet a lot of people, shake a lot of hands, kiss a lot of babies, do the whole thing. And it certainly helped.
I want to jump in on that, and I ask this sincerely as someone. Look, I've been involved, obviously, in provincial politics. I'm from a small town, so even the municipal is different. So, my
Mhm.
question: so, you are a councillor at large. What was the thought process in going councillor at large versus going in like a different ward or a different city location? What led you to that decision?
Yeah, I thought about both. I considered both seriously. When I was a year ago, when I was looking at the election, I was kind of looking at the changes that our city council was going to be seeing. And I knew there was a few open seats at large, and I wanted to win. I think representing, a part of the city or the whole city, really we all have the same goals in mind to make St. John's the best place it can be. And for me that opportunity was at large. And so that's kind of why I went for it, but I did consider going for my ward as well, but I am also a big picture thinker, and I don't see success for the city just in one neighborhood, one community. It's all around. So it was a good fit for me.
So, am I wrong in though that that leads you to having to cover a hell of a lot more ground? Would it not? Like that's a lot of places.
It's interesting because, yeah, we represent the whole city, the four counselors at large, and then the five ward counselors represent their ward. So we do have kind of a broader scope. However, a lot of ward issues will go to ward counselors first. So there is a lot of teamwork involved as well, and we're able to help out in ward issues and stuff like that as well as looking at the big picture.
Okay.
Kate, like you, I was interested, as the two young people on this podcast, I can relate to being interested in politics at a young age. Both my parents are journalists. Both my parents are
Ouch.
journalists, and I was raised around politics from a young age. But when I was 22, I cared about drinking and partying and girls, and I was getting ready to go overseas. And the thought of doing something like this, even though I was engaged politically, never would have crossed my mind. Why did you want to run for municipal politics?
It's a good question, and one that I've gotten a lot. It's like, "Oh, when I was your age, I wasn't doing anything like that." And I get that question. And sometimes I question it myself. I'm like, "Whoa, I'm 22. This is wild thing for me to do." But I was always somebody who was involved as a kid, whether it was politically or in other leadership positions, which, I'm of the belief that kind of everything is political, even if I didn't know it at the time. And then I started university, and that's kind of when I got really involved with different organizations, nonpartisan political groups and stuff, doing some advocacy work. And I realized that we're missing a lot in our political spaces, a lot of different representation. And I didn't think that I would be the one to put my name forward. I had considered it, but like many others who run, you get a nudge from somebody in your circle who says, maybe you should consider this. And the timing worked really well for me. I was finishing up my time at Memorial, which I really enjoyed. I graduated with political science, which, by the way, it doesn't help you run a campaign. People, it's not the same thing. Um, Graduating, I was looking for next steps, and I really wanted to stay here in St. John, stay in the province. And I know a lot of my peers were saying the same thing and didn't feel like they could. And I just felt like, why not put my name forward? We'll see where it goes. I wanted to work in this world anyways. So sometimes you got to take the chance and jump right in.
Who gave you that nudge?
Yeah, there was a few people who gave me the nudge. One of whom is actually a counselor in Bay Bulls. He's the deputy mayor, actually, Ethan Williams. He's a year younger than me, and he was serving on his council. And we went to the municipalities NL conference together as representatives from the Newfoundland and Labrador Youth Parliament. And we drove back from Gander together. And of course, we were debriefing all that we learned out there and, maybe dreaming a bit of one day, where will we end up? And he said, Kate, you know what? You should just do it. And gave me the nudge. And having other people who are in my generation kind of give that nudge is really encouraging. So he was a big supporter and one that helped me a lot getting my feet off the ground.
That's extremely cool to, just to hear about that experience, talking to your friends of that, coming from that particular generation. But that being said, I mean, lots of people from every generation get the interest, but it comes down to the work. And clearly the part that, you put the work in. I want to talk very quickly, and this is like sort of a weird question, but not everybody gets to experience election night. Tell me, like, was that a
Yes.
surreal feeling? I mean, you put that work in. There's a ton of stress. You're tired from all everything that you're doing. Just give us a little bit about that lead up and then that feeling from election night.
Yeah, election night it's a memorable one. I'm sure you know, Andrew, that they're really exciting and stressful, and like you said, you're pretty exhausted and burnt out by the end of it. But in the city, we delayed our election because of the Canada Post strike and some other complications. So we kind of pushed it a little bit, which made it even more exciting because I just could not wait to find out the results. But also, I had just spent 5 months on the campaign trail. Like you said, I was pretty tired by that point. Um, I honestly think I was kind of in a daydream the whole time. I didn't want to focus too much on the results because we were celebrating just the whole campaign, and what we had accomplished as a group, as a community, and as a family as well. But when we did see the numbers come in rolling, it was really exciting. There's a lots of clapping and hugging and crying and all the great things to celebrate the end of a successful campaign.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Kate, between kind of the provincial election happening at the same time, the Christmas break, it hasn't been a lot of action yet at council. And so, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where you differentiate yourself from the other councillors. One thing I think that public might not realize, and they think about politics, it, there's often this, optimism that it's about ideas. And when you're running a campaign, though, and you two have run campaigns, I haven't, but from my vantage point, ideas are sort of tertiary. Organization, communication, strategy, all of those much more important. And then, policy and idea kind of fits in between the cracks sometimes, usually with the winning campaigns anyway. So I'm going to ask though about policy and, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing with the city tomorrow, what would it be?
That's a good question. And, generally, I think our city is really well run. And even, everything's different from the outside than from on the inside, right? And you learn that slowly but surely when you're in those spaces. And I think the hard thing about working in government and any level of government is timing and efficiency. Sometimes it can feel slow, and I'm sure, Andrew, you felt the same thing. Sometimes change is really slow, and that's not unique to the city at all. I think that's just politics, unfortunately, that the changes that we'd all like to see, residents and counselors alike. Sometimes that movement is slower than we'd like, and it can be frustrating, I'm sure. And of course, I've only been there for a couple of months, so I'm sure there'll be things that I learn along the way. But I think if we could just snap our fingers and things would change, I think our world would be a really great place if we use those changes for good.
But you seem, Kate, like someone who's come in grounded and realizes that if, like you say, if change was as easy as snapping your fingers, it would all be done. It's, I think, the challenge, but also the fun thing is knowing that it does take time. It takes perseverance and persistence. And you seem like someone who already knew that coming in. Some people don't. And that's not an age thing. Like some people who've been around many, many, many years, but not elected, come in thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm going to change this," and they don't realize, like, shit, this takes time. Um,
Mhm.
and so, like, that's sort of how I see. But you seem like someone who came in already ahead of the game.
Yeah, and I had a lot of conversations before the campaign and throughout with people who have worked in all levels of government talking about these kinds of things and what to expect. and that kind of stuff. But I also think that, there's processes and procedure in place for a reason, to make sure when we're doing these changes and making these changes, they're the right ones and they're lasting and all that kind of stuff. So to say, we can snap our fingers and everything is just good, would be magical. But we also need to make sure we're making the right moves. That's really, really important. Again, at any level, not just the municipal. So, it's a learning curve for sure.
And yet, I don't know what you would do with the magic wand in your hand.
I don't know. That's a really tough question. I think for me, what I ran on, and what I continue to believe in, is that I want to see St. John's as a place where young people can envision their futures. And, part of that is having access to safe, quality and affordable homes, improving our public transit system, public safety. All of these things continue to be top of mind, as a young person, working in the system. And if I could wave my magic wand, I would make it all happen, so that every young person, whether they're from here or visiting, would see this as a place that they could build a future, a family, and build a career.
Oh,
I
thanks for
think
that, because I don't know what I would have done.
It's a tough question.
I'll just jump in because again, you're talking about, and I think that's super important. And again, as someone who has young kids, we all want to build that future. But the other interesting thing too is that looking at your website, as someone that grew up very close to your grandparents, you're
Yeah.
very connected to seniors issues and the importance of seniors in the community. Any changes or sort of things you've seen or learned since your time sitting in the counselor chair when it relates to that front, just these challenges and things that can be done?
Yeah, seniors are incredibly important in my life, and I did grow up alongside my grandparents and continue to be very close to them, and have learned a lot from their experiences, but also from others in our city, during the campaign trail, and also now as a counselor. And it's all about the right support, I think. We host a lot of seniors events with the city, and I've attended many of them, and the opportunity to socialize, go out for a dinner and a dance down at the Foreign Green Room at City Hall is amazing. And we're losing some of that, I think, in today's society, where we can disconnect really easily.
Yeah.
And those opportunities to stay connected as a community, promote well-being and health, and good mental health, and all these things. But a lot of the challenges that young people are experiencing are also experienced by our seniors community as well. So when we talk about housing, finding the right housing can be difficult, and healthcare, and public safety too. I've talked to seniors who have lived in this city for their whole life, and they're seeing things change, and they want to keep the St. John's, the safe St. John's that they remember. And so those issues aren't unique to young people or seniors either. We're all living through challenging times, and we need good leadership at the forefront too, and collaborative leadership too, because a lot of these changes can't just be made by one level of government. That's for sure.
Kate, I think we have a few questions about young people in politics that would be really fitting for you. But the one I wanted to start with is kind of being in the public eye. Andrew has had more than a decade of experience of that and being on the evening news. I kind of have the luxury of being in print media and just a name on the page and behind a paywall at that. So it's already changed a little bit with the podcast. But your municipal politics is where citizens are most engaged on an individual level with politicians, and your name is out there, your face is out there. How are you adjusted to that, and how does it feel? For strangers to just come up and talk to you. Have you gotten used to that yet? Does it still feel weird? What's that experience and feeling like?
Yeah, it's definitely an adjustment, and I don't mind it at all. I think those interactions, those casual interactions you have maybe at the supermarket, or I was at yoga this morning, that kind of thing. I enjoy it. I like saying hi to people, having those conversations, hearing about their days, their lives, how we might be able to help them. But I don't know if you ever get used to it. Maybe Andrew, you can give some advice, insight there, because It is different, and especially not only for myself, but also for my family and friends when we're out together. We might be walking down the street and I'll be stopped sometimes or waving and they're like, Kate, is this what you do all the time? And of course it's not all the time, but it is an adjustment. Um, you know, People knowing you and you not necessarily knowing them.
Well, the one thing I would say, Kate, is I mean, you're new to this position, you're new to council, and you're already recognizable. That will only continue to grow. And so, and in some ways, the pressure gets greater because as you become more visible, I mean, I even noticed a change when I went from opposition to government. You're just
Right.
automatically on the news more. So, I mean, you're going to see that. Look, I don't think there's any advice for me to give to you except that I think people appreciate authenticity. I think people appreciate knowing that you are who you are. I mean, look, there's certain things we all can't. You have to judge yourself accordingly, as they say. And sometimes there was never really too often that I felt, oh, I'm not living my life because of this political thing. Like, yeah, you'd see me down at the concert. I'm having a few beers. I'm listening to the music. I'm there with my wife and my friends and whatever. And I remember somebody saying, "Man, you're just a normal guy like us." I'm like, "Yeah, that's how it's gonna be."
Mhm.
But it seems again, I think you already seem like you're on the right track there. But you will also have your fun times where you get the less than sensible people that recognize you, and you know. Anyways, you'll be prepared for that, but that it continues to go up, and you're already on that upward trend.
Yeah, it was important to me because you know all this before going into it. People warn you or advise you that you should be prepared. You mentioned authenticity, and at the end of the day, I always want to be just Kate. Like I'm still just me. Like you, I go out with my friends. We'll have a pint at the Duke on a Saturday night, and I still enjoy my life every way I would. Yeah, of course there's things you don't do, but I don't think I was a wild one before. So there hasn't been, too much change.
I got to
Kate,
jump in here, AB, and again, I'm not gonna lie. I use dated references here, a lot of them from the early seasons of The Simpsons, but there's this one where Ralph Wiggum's heart is broken on TV by Lisa when she says that she didn't want to go to the event. And when you said that I was the non-young person on this podcast, you may be able to go back to that exact moment where my heart broke. But speaking on that note, I was like, since we were doing this podcast, we've been contacted, Alex and I, by a lot of people. And I had a contact from a gentleman, and I've gotten to meet him before, a young fella. I know you're familiar with Ben Oates. And he was, so I think he's got the political junkie gene in him too. He just likes the fact that we're having these conversations. But he was talking about, like, and I sort of asked him, like, what are some things we can talk about? And you're the person to talk about, like, just talking about young people now, this generation today. I mean, we've already undergone, when we talk about COVID and when we talk about the advent of social media, we see what's going on in politics down south around the world. Sometimes the word malaise is tossed around there. It's not something I had to deal with when I was 22 or even 32. Um, just maybe thoughts on that, like how it impacts engagement, how it impacts young people getting involved or wanting you to be involved in the political experience, and just your thoughts, I guess, on that.
Yeah, I think, like you said, politics is changing, and even, from the time graduated high school, was in high school, first dipping my toes into now, it's changed like so much, right? Through all the things that you've mentioned. And I do find myself in a bubble of people who are very politically inclined, through school and just by nature. It's the topic of conversation. But also I think young people are really invested. I think sometimes it's difficult to know where to channel that kind of energy because it's not everybody's thing to volunteer for a party or a candidate or to run themselves or post on social media their political thoughts. But I do know that young people are thinking about these things because there's a lot of uncertainty in our world right now, not only here in the city, in the province, country, but also internationally. A lot of uncertainty, and we care about the outcomes. And I think, I I was surprised, pleasantly surprised throughout the campaign to hear from young people in my circles and also outside about some of those things that they want to see. And I continue to hear from people. And it's funny you said social media, and social media has been changing, and it's good and bad for many different reasons. But for my generation, it's been a great way for me to connect with other young people and hear about their opinions, their thoughts on different things. And we're more likely to send a DM than to send an email, kind of thing. So that's been really nice. But I do think that my generation and youth in general are really tapped into what's happening right now, and do really care.
Idea being tapped in, one component of that is volunteering. And
Mhm.
something that I've heard, not just in Newfoundland, but across the country, is that political volunteering is just plummeting. And that's municipal, provincial, federal. And of course, we had all three levels of government go to the polls this fall. So, did you find to be a real challenge to build that volunteer base for your campaign, or did it help that you're in a world of political junkies, so you knew where to turn really quickly?
It was interesting. I struggled at points finding volunteers, and I had a rule for myself, or maybe I should say my parents had a rule for me, that I wouldn't go outdoor knocking by myself. Just, safety reasons. And sometimes it was hard, right? Everybody's got commitments these days. People are working more, young people are working more to afford tuition and housing and groceries. And, you know, um, other generations aren't immune from that either. Life is generally really busy. And it can be hard to get volunteers. What I found was that I really had a solid core group, which I think is pretty typical. You have your 5 to 10 people who you can call on, and they'll show up, and they rallied around me for those 5 months. But just in today's world, people don't have time and energy necessarily to get out. But I do think it's really, really, really important to be supporting candidates that you believe in, help them cross the finish line. And the fact that we did have the overlapping elections as well, I could see the drop off, right? Because towards the end of my campaign was kind of the start of the provincial election period. And there was definitely a little bit of a turnover because a lot of my friends are affiliated with parties and wanted to help their provincial candidates as well. So we did a lot of sharing. You get them for the morning, I get them for the afternoon, or the opposite. And, me and some provincial candidates became friends too because of that. It was like, oh, you were with so and so today. They're out with me this afternoon. Like, those volunteers really are, you can't do it without them, really.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that core group. Who was Team Cadigan? Who was your campaign manager, your CFO, your core team for strategy and getting out there and winning?
Yeah, it was mostly my friends. It was young, politically engaged nerds, might I say, like myself. Ben Oates was a big part of my team, and he was my campaign manager. Him and I don't always agree, but I think that's a really good thing, because we kind of push each other, challenge each other, and we've been good friends for a long time. So can be really honest too when we needed it. My CFO was my stepbrother. My biggest door knocker was a buddy from political science, and my mom. I had a pretty tight group, and it was mostly people who I had known before, and really showed up when I needed them to.
I'm gonna jump in here now, and I'm gonna make a statement, and it's, I guess, not just for you, maybe for Alex as well. Um, and hopefully it's coherent. And basically, tell me, look, am I full of shit, or if agree, disagree, or whatever. One of the things, because you're talking about engagement, we're talking about the three levels of politics. So we've all watched three campaigns this year. one of the things that when we talk about volunteer involvement, even candidate engagement, is just the sheer animosity that's sort of existed on the political levels at the especially at the federal and provincial levels. But one of the things that I like about municipal is that it's not affiliated politically party wise. People are supporting Kate Cadigan, people are supporting candidate whatever, and you're probably bringing people from both sides of the equation. But I saw times, especially federally this year, where people were not putting up signs because they just didn't want to take the abuse. People didn't want to put messages on Facebook just because of there's one thing to have engagement. There's another thing when people just get nasty. You haven't even said anything yet, but if you're affiliated with a color or a certain political stripe, that people just go sideways. It doesn't seem like it's at that level municipally, and maybe it can be a little more about the issue, the people. People aren't looking at you saying, "Well, I don't like you because of the color shirt you have on." And I think that's what I already like municipal politics because it's probably the most impactful on many levels, but it's also less foolish right now than what you're seeing on some of these other levels.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's, a certain level of foolishness in all in all levels of politics, and we're not immune to that kind of thing. I know other candidates, and myself included. We had signs tampered with, stolen, all that kind of stuff, and that can't be because I'm affiliated with a color or a party because I haven't been. And it's it happens, and unfortunately right now that's part of the game, it feels. And I don't think it should be. But again, it's one of those things that you kind of know. But running municipally, knowing that I could avoid a lot of that kind of politics and divisiveness is a huge part of why I chose municipal, right? I'm not in many young people, and I'm not in a position to kind of settle down into a party quite yet. And the Kate Cadigan, thanks for Kate Cadigan kind of thing is really nice, and you get to avoid a bit of that polarization that we're seeing. It's not only down south, it's here in our country as well, and in our province. And I'm I'm on Facebook all the time, and I read comments on MHA's posts and stuff, and I think I'd find that really difficult if the same thing was happening in my role.
I guess one of the advantages of starting as early as you did, earlier than almost all the other at-large candidates, is you could pick your color first and avoid some of those crossover problems and jerks in public.
Yeah. And that's part of it too, right? That was a really fun part for me, was picking out the colors and the designs and all that kind of stuff. But choosing all of that carefully at a municipal level, so people don't see it and automatically think one way or the other, because you're right that sometimes before you even say something, people just assume things based on your political affiliation. And that was definitely a consideration when we picked the color for my signs.
I'm going to jump in now. I know it's a small sample size, only in the chair since the fall. And, you came in, obviously prepared, put a lot of work in. But once you get in there, anything that's surprised you since being in the role and being down at council chambers and stuff? Any surprises so far that you probably hadn't expected or hadn't expected as much of?
Um, I talked to a lot of people beforehand. I will be honest that I talked to current counselors and previous counselors beforehand and had a pretty good pulse, I think, on how things were going to roll if I got elected.
Yeah.
Surprises so far, I think, um, you know, outside of the like sitting in council chambers and stuff, I think the social aspect is surprising, and how your social life and your personal life, we kind of talked about it a bit before, but your all your friends and family, you're their counselor, right? And they reach out to you with questions and concerns, and you respond the same you would anybody else. But getting those questions like out and about, like at a, a friend's house on a Friday night watching a movie. I just think that's really surprising. And I don't know, maybe I should have expected that, but I really enjoy it because I like that kind of engagement, that
Yeah.
informal kind of engagement. But I do get surprised sometimes with some of the questions coming from my friends and my family.
So Kate, in years of covering city politics in St. John's, one of the sort of, I don't know about unique, there are other cities where this is a debate, but really in St. John's, there's always been the big tension between, especially downtown, but really citywide, heritage versus development. In a way that, Halifax doesn't have that debate the same way. It doesn't exist there. Moncton doesn't have that debate the same way. St. John, a little bit, but really it's kind of unique here. And it's, a debate over the decades that I grew up around. I was raised around it. I'll plug my book for 30 seconds because it came up there. But the housing crisis has changed that a little bit. And people who I would have expected to fall on one side of that debate in the past have kind of made arguments to push aside some of those historical, concerns in the face of, the need for more housing. How do you balance those two concerns, heritage and development in general, and then how does housing change that for you? And I guess the triangle of concerns, how hard is it to strike that balance, and in which way do you lean?
Yeah, it is still a big debate, I think, and it's changing kind of how we talk about it because the need for housing is so high. But it was one of the things when I was knocking on doors that was brought up the most, especially in the downtown area. For me, it's about, responsible development and also respectful development. I think our heritage here in the city and across the province is one of the most special things about St. John's and Newfoundland and Labrador. And, to take that or change it drastically, we'd be losing a bit of what makes us so special. And I understand the attachment to some of these heritage pieces and properties because they are so beautiful and unique to St. John's. But we also in the same vein, we need housing, and that's what I heard. And continue here from my age group is that we need housing and we need diverse housing options. We don't need the same kind of house everywhere in the city. We need different kinds of homes. So I think it's about being smart but I also think respectful because um, you know, you can change the city through development, but you don't want to change the character too much of what makes St. John's so unique. And we have a few big developments coming down the line, and um, we need the housing. And I've heard from lots of people, wow, I'm really excited to see these kinds of things come forward because I know there's a huge need for it. So those kinds of conversations in balance with the need to protect our heritage are important. And I think it's a fine line. It's a fine line between overstepping and also making sure that we're doing the best we can to build up our housing stock in the city.
I'm just expecting you now, Alex, to continue. Like, look, I'm just a bayman in this conversation. You guys are talking, talking about heritage stuff. So I'm just expecting Alex to continue on down this path, and he comes from it naturally too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was the sort of thing that I was attached to growing up. My parents were engaged in the heritage debate. I remember early Shanny Duff, debating Andy Wells, and maybe that's a
Mhm.
way to pivot. Municipal politics, because it is so much closer to the individual, can feel more personal sometimes. And uh, Andrew and I talked about this in a previous podcast, how the tenor of the debate has gotten a lot more calm and tame, even certainly at the city level. That has to be the case. And I don't know if those meetings before the public meeting are heated, but it's not the same as in the Andy days and Paul Sears and those guys. Maybe that's for the better, but do you look forward to like really getting into it with one of your counselors in the future, and maybe having a little political scrap and getting your blood and your juices going?
Yeah, I think for sure for the right reasons. Of course, I'll get feisty. I can be if I need to be, and I'm sure over the next 4 years that there will be things that come up that I am, everybody knows me as a bit more of a, happy-go-lucky gal, but I am also known to fight my battles when I need to. It's funny you mention it because my grandfather, he's 83, and he always says, Kate, like we should make the city hall like it was when Andy Wells was there. I'd watch those meetings with you in them if it was like that. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Like, because I do think generally it's a good thing that things aren't as feisty, but I think passion is good, and having those passionate conversations are good. And it's democracy thrives on that kind of debate. Respectful and healthy good debate is part of what makes democracy thrive.
Yeah, I mean, Alex and I chatted about this recently in a podcast where I said that having people get excited and overstimulated in legislature or a city chambers or at the House of Commons, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's meant to be that way because you have passionate, differing views. Um, Now, at the same time, some people do love the old. Some of the old battles. I mean, I'm familiar with some of the ones in the House of Assembly. Even back then, I mean, growing up in Port au Basque, when we watched the news, we were watching St. John's City politics. So yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting to see how that goes for you. One thing I want to ask, I mean, look, you're busy as is. You a student from what I can gather. How are you finding it now? Take on this huge amount of work, like anything to share there in terms of time management, lessons you've learned, and trying to you've taken on this massive responsibility, but it's not like you weren't carrying a full load before. It's a lot to take on for anybody.
Yeah, like I said before, it's an adjustment and it's a learning curve. Not only are you learning about the role itself and the bylaws and the procedure and all that kind of stuff, but you're also learning how to manage the job in your own personal life. And counselors are part-time. So, managing that schedule is I think it takes time to figure out kind of the balance that works best for you. And everybody does it a little bit differently. So I guess that might be one of the surprises for me was the adjustment in my time management thing. It's schedule, I guess. And you're right. We politicians at any level still have all sorts of other responsibilities in their life, and learning how to manage that is important. Also makes you way better at your job, I think, when you can manage that effectively.
I used to love to let my city MHA colleagues have it and say, "You guys don't know how good you got it. The counselors are doing all the work." Uh, you know, they didn't have to deal with anything compared to what the counselors doing. Because out our way, being from a rural area, I mean, we did. It's a whole different ballgame. But
Yeah.
having been around town now since I've been elected, I mean, the city council it's a big deal. Like it really is taking care of a lot of these basic issues day to day that
Yeah.
that some of the MHAs don't have to deal with.
Yeah, it's busy, and winter is especially busy, I would say, especially with all the snowfall that we've gotten so far. And we're available, and like you said, we're really boots on the ground, and we are often the first point of contact for many people, even if it may not be a municipal issue. Sometimes we can connect the dots and connect people to other people. And it is busy, but it is about time management at the same time, and you need to take care of yourself. Both of you would know this, in any profession, you need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself so you can do the best in your role.
Yeah, I'm really glad that this topic of time management came up because other cities, Halifax, for instance, have full-time counselors. And I've been wondering about this for St. John's for a while because we've had some young counselors, young could be 30s and 40s as well as 20s in the world of politics, uh,
Mhm.
who didn't stay that long. And the ones who have stayed longer are often retirees or old enough that they could manage a part-time job or a job that has really flexible work hours, like real estate. Uh, and I've had discussions with people who say, well, maybe St. John's should have full-time counselors as well, so that the young people who get into it have the economic security to stay in it and do it. But perhaps this is another side of things. You are a student. If that was the
Mhm.
case, would you even be able to do this? And, where do you fall on that idea of full-time versus part-time as the job becomes a little bit more intensive over the years?
I think I I find it a difficult one to answer because I'm still figuring it out how it is now as me in the role as it being part-time. I think if I wasn't working in it, I don't know how my opinion would change, but I think that you said something about making it like economically viable for people to work in this world, and for a lot of people working on a part-time salary with a full-time responsibility, if you will, wouldn't be easy. And especially if you have other big life responsibilities, family, kids, those kinds of things. I think, you're juggling a lot. And when we look at engagement from a candidate side of things, and when you look at who's running and why they're running and all that kind of stuff, it would be interesting to look into that and maybe see, would more people run if it was a full-time position? How would outcomes change if it was a full-time position? How would, engagement with the community, with residents, change if it was a full-time position? We're busy, and especially ward counselors are super busy, that maybe it would be something in the future that might be considered. I don't know, but um, from a candidate point of view, that's what I find really interesting, is how would those demographics change if it was a full-time position.
So we've kept you pretty long here, Kate, but we're not letting you go just that easy. This is when we actually get to the tough part. And, we ask the really hard hitting questions here. The lightning round is upon us now, where like we want to find out, and I think people want to know a little bit more about Kate Cadigan. So we're just going to toss a few at you, quick ones. Um, Political idol.
That's a hard one, and I people ask me that. I've been asked that before, and I don't. Is it bad to say that I don't know if I have a political idol?
That's
I
not
think
bad.
there's good bits in lots of political people, but I don't know if there is one who I see as my only role model. There's plenty.
Well,
See, normally, if I was the media here, I'd say that's a real cop out, but we're going to let you off. But that's a good answer.
But I'll admit it, it's a bit of a cop out, but I honestly don't have one.
Well, I gave Kate way too hard of a time over the magic wand earlier, so I'm not going to do that again. Um, Although my lightning round question was way too similar to Andrew's, and I don't have a second one. So, favorite fellow counselor?
Favorite fellow counselor? That's an interesting question. I I like them all. We have a really fun group, and we're still obviously getting to know each other. Um, I don't know a favorite. I think Jill Bruce has been a really great mentor to me. She is another woman in politics. She served a term before. She keeps an eye on me, which is really nice. So we've become good buddies. And she's a good mentor.
Excellent. I got one here now. Um, I'm going to take you off the hook. Look, you're from St. John's, but okay, you have to visit somewhere else in Newfoundland and Labrador. Favorite place other than St. John's?
I grew up going to my grandparents' cabin in Trinity, and that would have to be my favorite place to visit. I spent most of my summers there as a kid, and have great memories there. And it's a good place to get some beer from Port Rexton and ice cream from Aunt Sarah's and go for a dip in the ocean.
Well done.
Great choice. I love Trinity too. Well, Andrew got his Bayman question in. I'm the townie. I'll ask it from the townie side. What's your favorite place in St. John's?
My favorite place in St. John's, like anywhere, like food,
Anywhere.
drink, scenic, anywhere.
Ball is in your court.
My favorite place in St. John's, I really enjoy to hike. I enjoy hiking, and I love taking my dog Annie up, up by Fisheries White Hills, taking her. You lose cell service for a bit, you're completely disconnected, and there's great view.
That you're a true politician when you hit the no cell service and you're like, yes, thank God. It's just like it's never a bad thing. All right, so this is the last one. Gonna toss it at you, and it's fair ball. Even though you've been I mean, look, you've been politically engaged for some time. You've only been on council for a little bit. I know you're involved with Equal Voice, but down the road, future aspirations provincially, federally. Every politician gets asked. Any thoughts or people putting it to you that maybe that's a possibility down the road?
Yeah, I've been asked what my plans are. I think naturally people are curious where I'm so young, and I have lots of time to make jumps. Right now, I'm focused on the next 4 years and where that takes me. No immediate plans, but who knows what the future holds. I so far so good, and I can definitely see myself sticking around.
Kate, from a couple of jaded, cynical guys in their 40s, thank you so much for coming on with us, telling us about your story and your time in municipal politics. Andrew, Kate, anything else you want to touch on here before we sign off?
No, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Well,
Thank you.
I'll just clue up by saying this, Kate. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I think you're someone to watch, and it's really important to us and to all of us that uh, the number one, you're going to inspire other people to get involved in politics. We continue to need that. It's harder, I think, than ever to do it for so many reasons, including the negativity that surrounds it. But seeing someone like yourself there, I think, is going to inspire other people. But we're all rooting for you too, because the better that our politicians at all levels do, the better we're all going to be off for that. So we're rooting for you. We're really hoping that you continue to enjoy it as much as you obviously do. And thank you for making a little bit of time for us. This is really, really awesome.
Of course, happy to. Thanks so much.
Wow. I'm sure she's tired of hearing it by now, but that is a pretty composed 22-year-old. I certainly would have been able to get in front of a microphone and speak to the public like that when I was 22. Hell, when I was 32.
Yeah, sometimes you feel bad because you're trying to say nice things and people say, I'm not even sure the word that they use, but like I'm just legitimately impressed. Because it's one thing, like like you said in the interview, like when I was 22, I was in school. I had no thoughts as to policy decisions and taking a leadership role and doing that. It took a while for that to even click into my head, and to have Kate 22 and again, not just, oh, I'm going to run and did it. Like it was clearly methodically laid out in plans. It's just someone that's got their game together.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And yeah, I look forward to dealing with her in my professional life, maybe asking some harder questions and seeing how she performs under pressure, not just with us as reporters, but with our other counselors as well. And maybe seeing a little bit of that feistiness come up in council one day.
I like that. I mean, not like you said, happy-go-lucky normally, as the word she used, but politics for everybody. Especially when it's an issue that's of importance to you, you get a little bit feisty. I just like the fact, look, especially now, we're not getting a ton of coverage of political life on any level here in the province. Just the way things are, we've got all Newfoundland. We still obviously have some of our traditional methods, but people like Kate and other people that are running for council in this province, I'm glad that we're getting a chance to spotlight them, and then hopefully that builds that awareness. Like I say, I had a reader reach out talking about young people, and if we can do anything to encourage them and young people to get involved, and not just young people, to encourage anybody to get involved, because some days it feels like as we continue on, it's going to get harder because some days when you're going on social media and just reading that cesspool, it's hard to see why somebody would want to get into elected politics and governance and democracy. And then you see someone like Kate today, breath of fresh air, and just I am rooting for her.
Yeah, we're going to spend a lot of time in the weeds of provincial politics and federal politics, but it was nice getting on the city level and engaging with a newcomer in that world. And I'm sure we'll find some times now and again to do it again in the future.
Absolutely. So, on that note, folks, look, we hope that you have enjoyed this episode. We're having a blast bringing it to you. We got producer KP in the background who's keeping us on track, and we're so grateful for that. As always, it does matter. Myself and Alex been talking about you. Please, thank you for listening, but please keep listening and tuning in and liking and subscribing. These things actually do matter. Please spread the word. You know, pass it on to whoever you can, and like we're loving to do this, but we need support to continue on, and it's been awesome so far, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to keep saying this every week.
Yeah, the anecdotal sort of feedback we've been getting from people has been great. Some people have come to us with opportunities and ideas that we'd be very excited to pursue because they would kind of allow us to bring this show in different ways. But it's still early days. Before we can think about any of that, we kind of need to get those numbers up and up and up. Like, subscribe, do it on each platform because that's what allows us to keep doing this because we'd like to keep doing it for a while. And yeah, so with that, I think we'll say goodbye until next time.
Onwards and upwards, folks. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.